What's going on YouTube? JT is Reborn here, and welcome back to another edition of my DC comic book reviews. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about Batman vs. Robin, issue number 3 of 5. This is the third part of Mark Waid's Batman vs. Robin tale, which is also a tie-in to World's Finest, a tie-in to Robin, also apparently a tie-in to the Monkey Prince book, which I have not read, which I guess I now have to read because this issue specifically mentions a few things from that series, like, hey, you got to read this to understand who this thing is. So I'm like, oh, dang it, I got to read some more stuff. And this will also be a lead into the next event of DC Comics, which is the Lazarus Planet storyline. DC and their events, man. I tell you what, we just go from one event to another event. I mean, we have Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths going on right now, the sequel to arguably the biggest event in DC Comics history. And guess what? It just feels like an afterthought, and now we're already on to the next thing. It's just a way to undermine that whole Dark Crisis thing. But then again, Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths hasn't been all that spectacular. But enough about that. I'll talk about that later on today. Let's talk about Batman vs. Robin number 3. Now, I really liked what Mark Waid has done with World's Finest. I think that's arguably the best ongoing at DC right now. So I was looking forward to seeing what he did in Batman vs. Robin. Yeah, I'm kind of tired of the Bruce versus Damian thing. I feel like we've done this countless times, but in this case, he's possessed, but it still feels like a continuous pattern. Every time a new writer grows the character, something else happens where the character is kind of regressed in some sort of fashion. Yes, this is possession, so he's not fully in control, but that pattern still kind of in some sort of way continues. But basically this time around, it's Bruce and Alfred. I'll put that in quotation marks because this isn't fully Alfred. Well, kind of. There's a piece of him there, but it's not really that. But anyway, so Damian gave the other Robins these magical artifacts and that to go toe-to-toe with Batman because, again, he's still in control, but he's still kind of... the part of it's him is fighting it back. He's able to kind of almost break free of the influence, kind of, sort of, not fully. There's a part of him that's able to kind of resist the Devil Nazad's magic, which a lot of other characters aren't really able to do fully. And I'm wondering what that exact reason is. Like, why was he specifically chosen as the vessel to bring Nezha back? Remember that whole Lazarus Heart thing? Is that going to play a factor in it? That better play a factor in it, because they really emphasize the fact that Damian's heart was used in some capacity, but it feels kind of like an afterthought. There's some interesting moments here. We see that him in his 666 form has his mother locked in this little prison of sorts to try and acknowledge like her own fault, like forcing her like, hey, are you going to actually acknowledge your own faults? Are you actually going to try and like prove that you really are trying to change for good? And then she never kind of says anything. It's like, all right, fine. That's what I thought. So, yeah, so she's kind of locked up in this thing, and he's kind of forcing her to kind of go through a change like Ra's al Ghul did. Batman's there, he fights the various Robins, and pretty much kicks all their asses. The Devil Nezha is taking all the magic, as we know, using like Alice to manifest it all into the Helmet of Faith. And we're coming to find out that this character named Pigsy, who was in the Monkey Prince book, which I haven't really read, which tells me I got to go read it now, because there's also mentioning of a tie-in right there, like, hey, you want to know more about this? You got to check out the next issue. Like, that's their little bait that's just like, hey, you got to read this to really understand this. And it turns out that the reason Nezha is trying to manifest all this power is because he's afraid of his son. So yes, Nezha's son is actually like a bigger threat than he is, and given how powerful we showcase Nezha, that must mean his son is pretty strong. So yeah, Bruce is there. He faces off against the various Robins, and it's kind of utilizing this time to showcase his guilt and his falterings. Like, maybe I didn't do things right with all of them. I probably should have done things, but there's also like this magic that's kind of manipulated him. There's a scene where Pigsy and Damian have a conversation. Pigsy's like, so deep down, I know you're trying to fight against his control. I can sense it, otherwise you wouldn't be here right now. So there's part of him that's kind of breaking free of it a bit, but he's not fully there yet. Pigsy's like, hey, so Nezha has his thing. Your mother's soul has her thing, but where do you fit into all of this? That's exactly it. You don't. Like, you're pretty much just an afterthought at this point. What is Damian's end goal in this thing? And then he tells them a situation about like how even Nezha wasn't always as bad as he was, and that the Lazarus resin corrupted him. And Damian asks if it can be reversed, but you can see Nezha kind of like strengthens his grip on him again as he tries to break free. It's something that we've seen a few times before. The fake Alfred kind of killed at one point, but in the best scene in the whole entire issue, we find that there was a piece of Alfred that was kind of left over, And they had this nice kind of conversation between the two of them, and Alfred basically says his goodbye, and he's like, you got to overcome your guilt, Bruce, and you got to save your son. Look, your son thinks that you blame him for my death. You weren't at fault. He wasn't at fault. I make my own choices. Let the guilt go. Close up that wound. Neza's using that against you and against him, and it's time to kind of move on. And also, your parents say hello. So it was a nice kind of final conversation, and I like the moment where Batman kind of has to take the mask, put it back on, and it's kind of like that turning point for him in this thing. He acknowledges his past faults with this kid and all this other stuff, even though I feel like we've kind of done that in Shadow War, and then he moves on to the next thing. So there's that overall consensus. I thought the issue was all right. It's too enjoyable. There's some good stuff. There's definitely some faults with it. It's not quite as strong as I think it could be. It feels like we've kind of done a lot of this stuff before, but the stuff it does right, I think it does well enough. And I think there's some enjoyable stuff within this thing. Art is pretty good, not as strong as some of the other Mark Waid books he's worked on, like World's Finest in recent memory, but there's some good stuff in here, and there's a few good moments. It's just not gripping me to the extent of some of the other books that Mark Waid's done, like I said, like World's Finest or the Robin book in general. Even the story, it feels like it's already kind of undermined too, now that we got Lazarus Contract, or not Lazarus Contract, that's another storyline. Lazarus Planet announced immediately afterwards, so I don't know. I wish I could love this thing a little bit more, but I'm not hating it. Like, I'm enjoying it just fine, but I think it could be a little bit better. And I'm trying to think of what exactly it needs to really kind of push it to that next level. It's just, I don't know. I think it's just fine for right now. So it's fine. If you have any thoughts on it, let me know in the comments section down below. Be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content, hit the bell for notifications. And yeah, I will be back later on today to cover more DC comic stuff. It's going to take a minute. There's a lot of books to cover, like Dark Crisis, Batgirls, Batman Incorporated. What else is there? Urban Legends. I guess I have to cover I Am Batman because there's a Dark Crisis tie-in issue, and that'll be the last time I cover that series on this channel, I'm sure. So look forward to that. All right, well, that's all I got to say. As always, take care now. Bye-bye then, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.